Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of the Sports Curious podcast, where we are going to talk about the most exciting start of the tennis season ever with the Australian Open. And here to chat with me about that is the 5 year old tennis phenom himself. We did take tennis classes together and tennis lessons. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me again. Yeah, unfortunately, I peaked way too early in tennis.
We've come a long way since summer tennis camp with half a day of tennis because it was 120 degrees out and some swimming.
I recall the highlight would be we used to call into, I don't know if kids these days would know, but there was a number you could call to see what the
118.
temperature was.
Mhm.
And we used to bet on how hot it was.
Remember when whoever got closest got a soda or something out of the soda machine?
That's something kids these days will never know anything about.
You're missing out.
Yeah,
The joy of calling 118 and have a robotic voice tell you the time is 11:15, temperature 120.
yeah, very hot.
Very hot, but such is life in Vegas. Speaking of hot, we are going to the land down under. We are headed to Melbourne, Australia to talk about the Australian Open. And while we're all cold here and freezing our buns off, they are having a lovely little summer down there in Melbourne and getting ready to start with the Australian Open, which is the first tennis tournament of the tennis season.
Yeah, starts out hot. The season gets going. Everyone's nice and fired up down in Australia while we're freezing. So turn on the TV
We're,
and enjoy it.
yeah, we're thinking of you all there and you're roasting.
Mm-hmm.
We always want what we can't have, so there you go. So the interesting part about the Australian Open is it's a big deal because it's the first tournament of the year. And up until 1987, it was actually toward the end of the year, and then they changed it to the first part of the year, which I'm sure gave it. I wasn't watching tennis in 1987, likely, but it didn't give it. It gave this grandeur, and where we're all really excited about the world of tennis right now. And so they're doing something different this year. It's kind of some new aspects of the tournament. And this year they're starting the tournament on a Sunday because the Australian Open is known for running really late on their matches. So talk to me a little bit about what they've this new change in the world of the world of Open.
Yeah, they decided to, I think also for attendance reasons, you would want to start a tournament on a Sunday when everyone's off work and school. So I think that also played into a factor. But like you said, Australian Open is known for having matches go very late, deep into the night, which can be troublesome for players and fans who are trying to stay up and watch and go to work, and players who want to go and recover after the match. So they started Sunday, which will allow them to space matches out more and start different times a little bit earlier. They also start early because it is so hot. So there's a
True.
reason that they go late into the night.
Yeah, they don't really do midday matches. I think they're morning and evenings, right?
It's pretty much impossible with how hot it was or how hot it is down there.
Was it last year that they actually they paused a few matches for heat, if I remember correctly?
I think they do every year. They have there's certain heat rules where when it reaches a certain heat index, they stop play because most of these courts don't have roofs, so most of them are outside in the direct
Yeah.
sun.
Yeah, their main court has a roof over the top of it, but not the rest of it. It's I mean, selfishly for those of us in America, it's great when they're sort of on the polarizing end of the day because
Mhm.
it's easier for us to watch because Melbourne's probably, I'm going to guess 15 to 16 hours time difference from central time here. And so it's really interesting to see that, and it's fun for us to be able to catch some of these matches. But I was reading a story. It was that Andy Murray had a match that ran until 4 a.m.
Yeah, I think that was the main reason they actually changed the rule because of how upset Andy Murray was last year. Because
Was
he
that just
went five
last year?
sets. That was last year, yeah. And it went 5 sets, and because it went so long, they have these bathroom break rules to prevent players from just wasting time. And it is a strategy to go to the restroom at certain points during the match, but he had already gone twice. But he didn't, anticipate the match going till 4 a.m. So he was very upset. He said some not nice words, I don't think.
I'm sure because it's also hot, so you're trying to hydrate so you don't
Mhm.
die. I mean, it's the
And
longest.
he's a little bit older, so
Right.
he just wants
Well,
to go to bed.
yeah. Well, imagine trying to recover to play a day and a like a day and a half
Mhm.
later, really, right? You're done at 4 AM and you've on a Tuesday and you've got to play on a Wednesday now because your match started on a Monday.
Yes, he called it a farce, the
A
scheduling
farce.
times. So
That's probably the edited word he called it.
so yeah, that phrase right there got the rule changed magically this year. So that's why they're starting on a Sunday.
As I tell my child, sometimes you have to use your voice to
Hmm.
benefit others, not just yourself. So he was probably really just thinking about everyone else.
Yes, and it helps that he's won majors and he was former number one player in the world.
True. That helps with those with a bigger voice. Well, the longest open match was 5 hours and 53 minutes, and that was the final in 2012 between Nadal and Djokovic. So, 5 I can't imagine playing tennis for 6 hours. I can't imagine doing anything for 6 hours. I guess I sit at my computer for 6 hours straight, but
I can't even sleep for 6 hours. So that,
this is true.
imagine,
No, no, wouldn't make it.
no,
Kudos to you 2 for playing in that. I'm out.
yeah, they're throwing
And
the
so
white
they
flag.
also it's interesting because I love me Australians. As you know, I used to work at the Australian International School in Singapore when we
Mhm.
lived there, and I love Australians, but they can party like no other. It's the most impressive group when it comes to partying, so kudos to you all for that. So I can't imagine A, being part of a 5-hour match with the amount of alcohol that's consumed in the heat. But this year, something new they've added is a party court outside of court number 6, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, if you like to party, you're Australian, they're giving you exactly what you want. You can watch tennis, party, maybe do some shoeys.
Ooh, shoeies. Does anyone
Yeah,
do you wanna
so I
explain
think
to
they're going to like. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, can you explain to the people what a shoey is for those who don't know?
For those who do not know, it's when you take a shoe or a cleat, potentially after a race, F1 race, and put your favorite beverage in there and drink out of the shoe or cleat.
So Daniel Ricciardo, who's an F1 driver, is big for doing this with the champagne. But imagine if
Mm-hmm.
they moved that over to
For a race.
Indy. What if they did
Yeah,
that at the Indy 500 and they poured the milk in your shoe? Because 'Cause that'd be real good. Hot shoe, milk in a May day in Indianapolis. Sounds blissful, doesn't it?
that's definitely a party.
So they've added this party court, which would be a lot of fun. And they're probably trying to get a little bit of that Wimbledon atmosphere, right? So Wimbledon is really known for the big, great lawn outside of the main stadium where fans congregate and watch the match on big screen TVs
Mhm.
that are out there. So that's kind of like a thing that they do at Wimbledon. I imagine they're trying to get the same vibe.
I was thinking more 16th hole at the Management Open. That's more where
That's
I
true.
could see this.
You went a little wilder. I went classy. So it's let's put them together.
Somewhere in the
16th hole.
middle,
Yeah, the 16th hole at the, Waste Management Open is legit. It's so much fun. If you've never had a chance to go do that.
yeah. Go.
It's a golf tournament in case you don't know, for those who don't know.
Hmm. So yeah, 400 fans, 2 stories, bar, DJs. It's going to be quite the party. I'm sure the players are going to love it.
Is this the center court situation? Or the
It's
bar
court 6, so I don't
party
know the
court?
exact layout. Yeah,
Party court.
yeah.
I mean, why not?
So I'm
But
sure if Andy Murray has to play on that court at 2 a.m., he's not going to be happy.
no, he's not. But it's I mean, tennis is like golf, right? It's you have to be you're supposed to be quiet and
Mhm.
respectful, and you can hear it when someone shouts something. You can hear on the broadcast when someone shouts, and you're like, "Oh, that was" because it was it like last year or 2 years ago, they threw someone out for yelling something super inappropriate, and I can't remember. It might have been Wimbledon, it might have been the US. I think it was the US Open.
It was
They
last year.
threw someone
Yeah.
out. Mhm.
Someone said
Yeah,
something
because it's
inappropriate to a German player.
I believe that was it, and out they
Yeah.
went. Once again,
Hmm.
US Open late matches,
Party.
don't close the bar early, but
No.
now One thing that the Open did this year as well is they increased their prize money. So they went up 5.8% from last year. So we looked at the numbers. The Wimbledon prize money is not out quite yet, but Wimbledon last year, just for perspective, paid the winners 2.9 million. Both men and the women got the same amount. Australian Open this year, winners are receiving 3.15 million, which is pretty exciting. But the biggest increase is for those who lose in the first round.
Mhm.
So you qualify, you go out in the first round, and their money's up 12.9, almost 13% more than 2023, and they're walking with 120 grand.
Yeah, I think that's way more impactful than the winners, what they're going to make, because we kind of know who's going to win almost. So these lower ranked players, 120,000 is extremely impactful for them
Mm-hmm.
because they're not necessarily making millions of dollars every tournament. So I think that's the biggest change right there.
Right, and you look at it, I mean, these players, it sounds to you and I like a lot of money, but they're also paying travel expenses and coaches and all those other things. So any little bit you can get helps. Now, let's dive in. You said you kind of already know who's going to win. You know, there's 128 players in each draw, and 32 of those will be seeded. And those seedings are used to not only what's the word I'm looking for? Qualify the level of talent, but also
Hmm.
to separate some of these big names so that they meet later on in the tournament, preferably in the finals for great TV ratings, but they also don't knock each other out early on in the tournament. So, talk to me a little bit about who we should be keeping an eye on this year.
We'll start on the men's side because I kind of mentioned that you don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, but this is pretty much the two guys that are going to be there in the end, unless there's some, unfortunate catastrophic injury. It's Novak Djokovic. He's won 10 Australian Opens, which is a record. He's got the record for overall major victories. Is it? You think he's at 24 now?
Mhm.
So, I mean, you can pretty much sign him up to be in the finals because of the way the seeding worked, like you said. He's not going to have to play number two, Carlos Alcaraz, who's kind of become his younger nemesis
Nemesis.
in a way, even though I think he's
Mhm.
16 or 17 years younger than him. And Daniil Medvedev is also on the other side of the bracket, and those two are pretty much, unfortunately, the two main opponents that he has to worry about.
So Carlos and Danielle are, well, one of them will knock the other one out to probably play Djokovic in the finals, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah.
Now I
And
did see that um Djokovic is playing Jannik Sinner, who is beat him twice. So that could be a challenge in his side of the bracket, but I'm sure he'll probably have his game face on and hopefully show up that day hydrated and ready to rock. Or not. I guess it is what it is.
yeah, I mean, anybody can lose. Sinner, he'll have to face him eventually, but who knows if Sinner will make it through.
Now, one person who notable that's not going to be there is Rafael Nadal. He was qualified. He was ready to go, and what was about a week ago or so, he announced that he would not play. He had a hip injury late last year and is still claiming that as the reason to not attend. So he will not be there this year. But the side to watch and the one to get excited about, at least for me, is the women's tennis. There are so many big names, and we do have last year's winner, Arena Sabalenka, who won her first Grand Slam title at the Australian Open in
Mhm.
2023. But there's a lot of huge names. Iga Swiatek. I mean, we're talking about Angelique Kerber, Danielle Collins, some of these great names. Coco Gauff, Naomi Osaka's back. We have so many to look forward to on the women's side.
Yeah, it really is wide open. Ever since it puts into perspective how good Serena was, that she won so many tournaments, as to where now it feels like every tournament a different woman's winning just because it's so competitive. So I think that really
Yeah.
puts into perspective how good she was. So I think we had 4 different champions last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm, mhm.
So it really is anyone's tournament, and the female representation is strong for sure.
It's awesome to see, and ahead of this, the Forbes came out with their list of top 10 female athletes in for earnings, and 9 of the top 10 female athletes in the world for earnings are tennis players.
Which is crazy, right?
Mhm.
All from the
I mean, you
same
think you're
sport, all from
right.
these huge pay increases we're seeing.
Well, what I'm curious on that list, and I dove into it a little bit, but there was no one from the
Mhm.
Women's World Cup on there and the soccer team. And so I'm curious, those are maybe prize earnings versus endorsements, because some
Yeah,
of these
I don't
players,
think that factors in endorsements now.
I don't think they factored endorsements. I think it was purely earnings from prize money, which makes a lot more sense. Like Iga Swiatek won earnings of 2.39 million last year, where I'm
23,
sure one could argue,
23.9 million.
yeah, 23.9, but sorry,
Yeah.
23.9 million. I can do math. But it's I mean, you can assume that Alex Morgan and some of those big names have made more
Mhm.
with endorsements, but it's pretty cool to see that tennis is really rising that occasion and paying their players, both male and female, well. That list includes names like Coco Gauff, Naomi Osaka, who wasn't even playing last year. Really, she had a baby, so she really didn't play most of the year. Venus Williams is still in the top 10.
And she's in her mid 40s, and unfortunately, she had to withdraw from the tournament, so she won't be playing. I think she
Boo.
withdrew a few days ago. So unfortunately, there will be no Williams sister.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember her record she just set at Wimbledon last year. She was the oldest player to make it to a certain level in the tournament, or to even play in the tournament.
I think it might have just been qualify and play.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're right. So then we have women coming back. They had babies and they're back, and we're happy to
Hmm.
see it. Naomi Osaka, as we've talked about, four-time major champion. And for those of you who aren't familiar with golf or tennis, they both use similar language. A major is sort of that big tournament championship. Major, they call it a major in golf. They call it a major in tennis. In tennis, they also call it a grand slam.
Hmm.
And so for those who aren't familiar with those terms, can you name me the Grand Slam tournaments? The 4?
In tennis,
Yes.
Australian Open's first.
Mhm.
Then we go French Open on the clay court,
Mhm. Mhm. Only one on clay
Wimbledon,
courts, right? Wimbledon
Wimbledon on the grass in July, and then the major season finishes out with the U.S. Open in New York, which is a party. So
is a
they
party, and that's
go
usually
out in
about
style,
September.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, usually during the start of football season.
Yep, exactly. Nice to wrap it all up together.
Hmm.
So we have Naomi Osaka coming back, Caroline Wozniak, who was away for 3.5 years, had 2 kids, and she won in 2018 at the Australian Open, and she returns as a wild card, which
She
means
does.
the tournament selected her to come in and play.
Hmm. As a previous champion, she got to come back, and if you recall, she had a pretty strong run in the U.S. Open last year when she
Mhm.
that was like her first major back.
Yeah.
I think she
Now
made
I
it.
was
I think she lost to Coco Gauff, if I'm not mistaken, who
I think you're right.
went on to win the tournament.
And I put in my notes, didn't she was she engaged to Rory McIlroy? Mo
I think we've had this conversation. Yeah, she was at one point, yes.
That's what I thought, okay.
And then she
Uh,
married David Lee, who's a former NBA player.
I just saw their People.com had their Miami apartment on sale that's for sale up on there. Looked lovely. Looked like they both have done okay. We have
Yeah, I think
Angelique
it's
Kerber, who is
well, yeah.
also coming back after having babies.
So big tournament for new moms.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one player I forgot to mention when we were talking about who's also not going to be there, and this player, as we start to wrap this up, is Australia's son, if you will. A little bit of a John McEnroe type of attitude. He's been known to be, he's like the bad boy of tennis right now, and that's
Mhm.
Nick Kyrgios, who is going to miss his 5th successive Grand Slam tournament, not playing at home in Australia, but to fill his time while he's not playing, apparently he signed a deal with OnlyFans, as one would.
You got to make money somehow,
Huh?
and that just seems on brand for him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he's just been. It might have just been the years of partying catching up, unfortunately, because he's by far one of the most purely talented players in the world. But it's just can't put it together,
I
unfortunately.
don't wanna compare him to Johnny Manziel, but super talented,
No,
and
yeah,
it's really it's interesting. So, well, gosh, it's been, what, 8 years or so since we lived in Singapore, but when we
mhm,
lived there, Kyrgios happened to be in Singapore for something and came to the school and did a tennis clinic with some of the kids, and I was not there. That I think we were in the US, but
mhm,
it was really cool to see how excited everyone was about having him, but they were also a little bit apprehensive because, he has, he's vocal, and
yeah,
so, when you're in front of a bunch of 3rd graders, you wanna be mindful of that.
yeah. He's kind of a rock star.
Yeah, quite literally,
And
yeah, so,
hopefully he'll be back at some point.
yeah.
But that OnlyFans money is pretty real, from what I've been told.
I mean, now think I want you to think about what you're gonna leave us with, but I'm gonna just add a little nugget of information I thought was interesting. So I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago. John McEnroe was on, the Smartless podcast. For those of you who listen to Smartless, great podcast. Listen to the Arnold Schwarzenegger episode. It's very entertaining. But he talked a lot about how, the guys asked him, "Would you have made it if you played any other like, did you play other sports?" And he said, "I would have never made it to the level that I was at if I had not played other sports and done other things because I would have been burnt out."
Mhm,
And so you think about that as you look at some of these players, like Coco Gauff is still so young and she's been around forever. What, since she was 15, I think, right?
that was
And
her first
so just
yeah,
think
her
about
first
that
major.
as right. So think about it as your perspective as you look at these players who've been playing for so long and how they're maybe not, or how are they not burnt out, or if they
Yeah.
are, they don't show it. So something just to think about as you watch this tournament, and as you prep for this tournament, watch Netflix Breakpoint. I called it Point Break earlier. Breakpoint, season 2 to learn a little about last year's tennis season, get you amped for this year's. But is there anything I didn't just steal your thunder on to finish us up today?
I was just gonna talk about Breakpoint before we left because I had the opportunity to watch it yesterday as it debuted. So I just wanted to close with that if we can
Is
because
it good?
it is good. Like you said, it's tennis is such a mental game because you don't have teammates, you don't have anyone else to lean on. If it's going bad, it goes bad quickly, and it's tough to.
Mhm.
And then the amount of travel that these players do throughout the year, it's a different physicality than football or basketball, but they're really
Mhm.
mentally and physically it's extremely straining. And I don't. Do you remember the Netflix curse last year in last year's tournament?
No, I don't.
So the Netflix curse from all the people who were featured on Breakpoint season one in last year's Australian Open either lost like in the first round or got injured, except
Mm.
for Sabalenka was the only one that she actually broke the curse technically because she won her first major tournament, but she was the only one to like advance past the first round. And I think
Oh, really? Wow.
a lot of players were apprehensive to do this year because how terribly things went for everyone last year in the Australian Open.
So for those of us who haven't seen this season of Breakpoint,
Mhm.
who's in it so we can watch to see if this curse comes true?
Hopefully the curse is gone. Sabalenka's back in it, and she broke the curse last year. So
Mhm.
hopefully, hopefully that works. We've got some American men who are surging. Actually, it's kind of a new generation of American men who can hopefully break through. Taylor Fritz, Francis Tiafoe, Tommy Paul, and then I don't know if you remember Ben Shelton from the U.S. Open, young guy. I think he's 20 now.
Mhm.
Went on that crazy run, and
Mhm.
he's featured at the end because he just comes out of nowhere. So that's kind of cool to see. And then on
Yeah, for
the
sure.
women's side, Sabalenka and Jess Pagula of the Bills owners.
I like
You
her.
get to see her.
She's
You
feisty.
get to see her go to Bills practice and kind of interact with the guys, which is kind of cool.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, definitely, it's
And
definitely
for
worth
those of you who
watching.
don't know, yeah, for those of you who don't know who Jessica Pegula is, her she's a phenomenal tennis player. Don't
Mhm.
get that. Don't let that be distracted by the fact that her dad owns the Buffalo Sabres, the hockey team, and the Buffalo Bills. But it was last year, I think it may be the U.S. Open, and she lost. I think it was U.S. Open, and she cracked open a Bud Light right there in her press conference and was drinking her Bud Light. Like, look, I lost. You guys, like, give me a break. It
Mhm.
was fantastic.
Yeah, so you get to see her, and
Something
there's
to look forward.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, if you want more, obviously follow us at lastnightsgame.com and follow us at Last Night's Game on social media. We're just starting the Australian Open, and there's a lot to follow. And so we're recording this episode a little bit before, actually, right before the actual tournament kicks off. So by the time you listen to this on Wednesday, there may be someone we missed. There may be something big that happened. So forgive us on that, but we wanted to get this set up and ready to rock before the open started. So that's where we're at. Check us out at lastnightsgame.com. Thank you, Scott, for being here with us today.
Thank you. Hopefully, there's no last night's game podcast curse,
Hopefully not. Well, good luck. I hope your player wins.
and it's gonna be a lot of sleepless nights.
What else is new?
Nothing. But now we have tennis to watch. Now we have tennis to
Exactly.
watch while we're awake.
Good excuse.
Yeah.
Have a great one.
Thank you.
Bye.